Elation and jubilation gamers from all around the world. I am Lucian, the World Gamer. Welcome to a show where we talk about everything gaming. And today I have a very special guest here with me, Jeremy Blaustein, legendary translator, voice director, and absolute authority in video games localization. Welcome, Jeremy, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Lucian. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. So, guys, he's worked on some of the best and most classic video games ever. If you love games from the 90s and the 2000s, you probably experienced his work. His curriculum is super stellar, with games ranging from Metal Gear Solid to the Silent Hill series, but also Shenmue and classic RPGs like Suikoden 2, Valkyrie Profile, Bundle of Hearts, Shadow of Hearts. So I mean, guys, he's the one who came up with the name Codec for Metal Gear Solid 1 in the now iconic phrase, "What is a man?" from Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So just wow. I mean, the more I think about it, the more it just blows my mind. And that's not even mentioning your role as a voice director and your work on localizing and translating the anime adaptation of a little series you guys might have heard of called Pokemon. So Jeremy, you had a hand in everything I love. You made my childhood, and I'm sure that of our viewers today in some shape or form. So it's an honor to have you here, Jeremy. Thanks again.
Thank you. I think that's a great introduction. Thank you. I feel on top of the world after that introduction.
Great. So, I gathered some notes to help me because we have a lot to talk about.
It's been a while, but it's all coming back to me.
Hey, how you doing?
So the first question that I have for you is, how did you come up with the name Codec, and what's the story there?
Okay. I started translating Metal Gear Solid after receiving, I was working in Massachusetts. I had left Konami many years before. And I got a request to translate this because what I had done, I think the first game I did for Konami was Vandal Hearts. And then I think the second one I did might have been Castlevania. And after that was Metal Gear. I got 3 giant blue binders. One of them had the script, one of them had a lot of background art, and one had kind of the setting, a lot of technical details about the stages and stuff like that. So I was working in Massachusetts, and I had 6 months to translate. It took me 6 months. In the process of translating it, as I read through all of the copious notes that Mr. Kojima had left in there, I felt I had a pretty good idea of his worldview. And of course, it was kind of a near futuristic technology, was all over the place. Everything very cutting edge. But when I got to the communications device that Snake was using, in Japanese it was musenki, which is simply wireless, like a wireless radio. Maybe like a walkie-talkie or something like this. But if you read the text, it was described as, containing this this burst technology, stimulates the bones of the ear, etc., etc. And it just didn't seem right to call it a wireless. And I already had to do quite a lot of reverse engineering of what Kojima had done in terms of technology. He had read a lot of things in, well, I don't know if he read them in English, but he read them in Japanese, yeah, and he put them in the game. So it's very difficult to figure out what he was referring to. I knew he was referring to advanced technology in some cases, but all the stuff with the shape-shifting metal and things like this, and the nuclear, the way the nuclear codes are used, etc., like this. So I had to do a lot of research. But yeah, I decided that wireless radio just didn't fit the worldview that. So I searched through a lot of technical magazines put out there by advanced kind of spyware, things like this. Just trying to read as much as I could about what technology this could possibly be referring to, Of course, it wasn't real, but I came across a term that I didn't know, which was codec, which stands for compression, decompression. Codec, compression, decompression. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds a lot like what Mei Ling's talking about. So I called it a codec.
Right. I think honestly that maybe, there are some terms in English that sounds way cooler when you are foreigner. Yeah. So I think wireless to him sounded like something very futuristic, So, but then to the average, person in America, it's like normal word.
Yeah.
So it's not as cool.
Like, yeah, it's more like, it's kind of like what we played with as kids, like a wireless radio, like almost like a walkie-talkie, or the things that people had in their trucks,
Right. Makes sense. And speaking of still, of course, on Metal Gear, the main protagonist is Snake. We can say that there is a lot of you, Snake, because you acted as a sort of bridge between the Japanese Snake and what we got, which is the American translation, which was later used as well in the rest of the world, of the Western world. So,
right.
A lot of you, but how much of you exactly would you say there is in Snake? Which character would you say was the most fun, had the most fun dialogues to translate?
I had fun with God, I think I had fun with, I would probably put up there Revolver Ocelot. I would put up there what was the shaman,
Vulcan Raven.
The Vulcan Raven, yeah. He was a lot of fun. And Liquid Snake was a lot of fun. But they all were fun. I had different voices in my head. And the answer to your question of how much is of course it's impossible. I read Kojima's work and I felt it in my body in a certain way. And I felt that I was receiving it half as a Japanese person and half as an American person. And my job was to try to, hear feel the Japanese in one ear and then let it come out my American brain. But the biggest thing is that, in the language of cinema or movies or anything like that, we have iconic sort of stereotypes, you might say. And they really don't match up one-to-one. If you grew up as a Japanese person, you're going to be watching anime, and the voice of Otsuka, who played Snake, for example, is so classic, and he's doing a certain kind of archetype. And I felt, well, I have to bring an archetype to this. But what archetype do we have in our culture that this feels like?
Matches.
And a lot of it is also a combination of what David Hayter, for example, on the first day, he said, I really can't do Otsuka's voice. It's so deep, and that's just not the voice I can do. So this is my recollection, that on the first day, before we begin recording, we have to kind of check, okay, how are you going to do this voice? Let me hear your ideas for this voice. So we went around, and David's, tried this or tried that, and what he said, he couldn't do a low voice. I said, well, do you have a Clint Eastwood in there? And he grits his teeth and he goes, yeah, I think I can do it like this. Yeah, something like this. And I was like, okay, perfect. We'll go with that because, frankly, we didn't really have crime. The clock starts as soon as studio time starts. We're paying studio hours. We got to get to work. And it's like chop, chop, chop in the studio. I wish people understood how quickly you move in the studio. You have to make very fast decisions. You hear a line. It's one line after the other. And so you have to kind of hear one line read and imagine how that's going to sound in the game compared to, the last actor that was his dialogue partner, because they're going in there individually. They're not, it's not true we had a whole different thing going. We had many people working at the same time in one large studio, each mic'd up, which is really unusual. Generally, one person goes.
All the voice actors.
Yeah,
Great.
that's
weird.
that Snatcher was very unusual. Yeah.
So there was. My understanding is that there was a lot of communication between you and the actors. Were you also voice director in Metal Gear?
No, I wasn't the official voice director. What I was brought on because I was the person that wrote the script. So I was literally sitting next to the voice director, and she gave me a very free hand to talk up on the mic and ask for people to do it this way or that way. And so I'm just a very vocal person. So, she works with them all the time. These were actors that she works with all the time. So she tended not to get on them very much about stuff.
Nice. So basically, that's a fantastic role, because later you did some voice directing. So I thought maybe you were voice director in there as well. You were unofficially the voice director, basically.
I would consider myself a co-director of it, since we were both literally giving direction to the actors, and we were the only one giving direction to the actors, the two of us. So, she tended to be more involved in the organization of which scene we were going to do next, so we could maintain a very tight schedule. She would say, flip to, page 97 in the script, go to the blue tab. And I'd be the one that said, can you put a little more emphasis on the word that there? Can can you make it a little more, 20% more angry, or, take that down a little bit. It kind of worked out that way.
And so once you also directed the actors' performances, you would say that at the end, David Hayter's performance managed to catch what you were going for, because you wrote those lines, but he spoke it. So his voice is what came to us, and that of the other actors as well.
I generally check how good the lines are by either saying them out loud, or in my mind I have the voice speaking, along with the the tempo, the emphasis. So I had a very clear idea of what I wanted each line to sound like. So it was sort of natural for me to request that I got it in that way. I was generally pretty happy with everything.
And honestly, I was pretty happy as well with the job you did. His delivery, it's now iconic. Everybody's delivery is now like lots of catchphrases in there as well, with the command. It's like, "You'll read your mind," and it's still the moment you read it, you have the character in your head speaking with the voice. The game.
I mean, it's a very big combination of the writing, the directing, what an actor brings to it. It's all these different people bringing their own minds to the character, and you get a kind of a melange of all these different things. So,
did you work closely with Kojima? Was it there a lot of distance back and forth? So did you ever get to meet him in person?
I went to Japan and visited Kojima in his office before I began the project, kind of a pre-start to it. And I remember him in his office with the Lego blocks, showing me a bit about it. But no, he's very hands-off when it comes to, once he's done with the work of producing the game, at least at the time, I think he probably speaks better English than he did then. He didn't speak any really then. So there wasn't much he felt he could contribute to the localization, I guess, or the English version. So he wasn't involved very directly, although during the recording sessions, there was a couple of days when he phoned in and kind of checked in to see how it's going. And he did have a representative there that tried more or less to keep tabs on how things. Yeah, he was trying to keep tabs on what was going on, but as I said, it moves very, very fast, and he couldn't keep up with the English. So it was it was just Chris Zimmerman, the director, and me, and the actors doing our thing.
Right. And I think that really not everybody realizes the huge part of the localization process is adapting the foreign script to make it sound natural or as natural as possible to the target audience.
Yeah.
And this involves a huge amount of research. I would say, what was this process like in the case of the MGS1?
Yeah, when I started, I the first thing I translated was the opening demo. And it's almost like once I finished that, I was deeply enough into it that the rest kind of proceeded from there. But it was very difficult because I think I had the opening demo on VHS tape. It was done. That was the only one that I got to work with. And kind of having the Colonel deliver those lines so that they matched with the sort of montage of the opening demo in the sub. It was a little tricky because Japanese tends to be backwards in the word order. So that was a bit tricky. But I realized very quickly I didn't know how military people spoke. I'm kind of a peacenik, into it.
Right.
So I began reading these books by this guy named Marchinko, who wrote these SEAL Team 6 books. Yeah. And I forced myself to read book after book after book by this guy Marchinko, so I could, I don't know, kind of absorb it into my pores. And it's when I realized, military guys, they tend to speak very economically, So, for example,
In the middle of a battle, you don't really have time for chit chat. You need to be short and effective, I guess.
Well, right. Also, if the Colonel and Snake had been on many missions together, like we're supposed to believe, they would have a kind of a shorthand between each other. And so we have that line. What's that? I can't even remember. What was the? OSP.
OSP.
OSP was just a line in Japanese that says something. It's similarly. It's a noun form turned into a verb. But it's a very ridiculous concept if you think about it, because you're not going to get sent on a military mission with no weapons. But I wanted it to sound matter-of-factly, like the Colonel was saying, "Oh, it's one of these again. It's the OS, and so it's the OSP as usual. Yeah, OSP,
But of course,
like everybody knows what OSP means,
he managed to pass this concept through totally. Me, as a kid, knowing nothing of military, and this was being my first military game in a way, I thought, okay, this must be regular stuff. We totally managed to get the concept through, totally. I was wondering one thing about the Marchinko's book. Does he curse as much as his reputation says in the books?
Yeah, he constantly cursing. Yeah. Every line is there.
Why do I ask? Because there is this game called The Rogue Warrior, in which he curses constantly, literally constantly.
Yeah.
Instead of sir, he goes like, I won't say it now, but you know what I mean. So I was wondering, did you know about the game Rogue Warrior? Supposedly it's from 2009. Supposedly very, very bad.
I never played it.
But did you hear of it or never even heard it? Well, it's a good pleasure. If you want to have a laugh, see a walkthrough, because it's really hilarious.
I heard of the game, but yeah.
All the time, it was very, very so bad. It was bad, not bad.
Unlike some of the games I've done, which are so bad that they're good.
But honestly, the games you worked on, they're all pretty. That's quite a curriculum there. There is an Easter egg in which you. In Metal Gear Solid 1, in which you get the camera, and whenever you take a picture of the environment, a ghost would appear. And it's the ghost of the developers. And among them, there is you. Did you ever manage to take a look at your picture in the...
It took many, many years that I was waiting for it, because I knew it was in there, because, I remember when he took a picture of me and they said it would be in there. But when I played the game, I never could find it. And it was only many, many years later that someone decided to find all of the ghosts, and they posted on Twitter or something. And I was like 20 years later, I finally saw my ghost.
It was in it was in a nice place too, because I think it was with the in the snow area where you beat Sniper Wolf.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
your ghost photo was in there. You had to take a very
right.
specific tree or something. Because I could barely tell it was you, honestly. I only knew that because it was written in somewhere, because honestly, it was very difficult. But at the same time, it was one of the very few, if not the only, Western, guy.
Yeah.
The rest was all Japanese people, of course.
Yeah.
MGS1 was recently re-released in the Master Collection Volume 1. I'm not sure if you're aware, but this means that your localization managed to possibly reach new fans. How does it make you feel that your work has finally been re-released and it's not stuck on PS1 anymore? Well, it was released on PC, but it was still, years ago. Are you happy about it? Is it a nice trip down the lane, or maybe you will leave the past behind?
I'm very happy about it. I think that, there's all these re-releases now, Silent Hill 2 coming out, and of course I understand why we want to keep it updated with the technology and to reach new fans. But, on the other hand, part of me feels like it's like what they call lightning in a bottle, it can only be done once, what you create at that time. And like I said, it's a combination of all these accidents, and those actors were doing it for the first time, so it was very fresh. So I would like it to remain as it was, something accessible to people. Make remakes if you want, but it would be a sad thing to see. I mean, imagine if someone, did a remake, rewrote King Lear, and then they just threw away the Shakespeare version because it's updated,
No, not really. I always say this concept specifically in my videos, especially like when I talk about remix. Oh, your cat is so. About remix, they never replace the originals. They add to it, to their experience. Both can coexist, both great, possibly, hopefully, when the remake is also good. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Update doesn't mean that the previous version should be deleted. I'm a big fan of preservation. So for me, that concept of deleting the past is totally nonsense.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So if you think of Kojima games, but also any other, Japanese game, you've also worked on games like Silent Hill. Oh my. A big over, so sorry guys. So they are made, these games, by Japanese people, but clearly the settings are mostly American driven. And you can see that this is how Japanese people see America. Right?
Exactly.
Especially at the time, Japanese people didn't know English very well, but it's interesting how much they love Hollywood movies so much that it influenced their games in such a big way. So you would think that with settings like this, those games were basically Western ready, but they were really not. Clearly they were not. And that's when you came into place in polishing everything for the Western audience. How did you deal with that? To see how did it make you laugh? Did you cringe? Did it irritate you in some aspect?
Yeah, I did all of those things. I think it's a very interesting thing that you're bringing up, and it's a little bit hard to understand. But in particular, in the case of Metal Gear Solid, I think it's even more interesting. In my mind, what Metal Gear Solid is it's the creation of Kojima, who is an enormous movie fan. And I can imagine him growing up watching these Western movies, these American movies, but he's watching them with the subtitles in Japanese. Now, if you read Japanese, if you speak Japanese, and you see the subtitles of the movies that you'd be very, very surprised at the subtitles. For example, there's rules about how long the translation can be, because when you only have a second to read them, for example. So there's kind of tight rules about how much a person can take in 1 second. And particularly in the old days, this Toda Natsuko, who was the most famous movie translator. I always thought she was terrible, absolutely terrible, because she took liberties that, people complain about translators taking liberties. If you read the Japanese subtitles of movies, you wouldn't believe it. And so anyway, I'm imagining Kojima-san watching all these movies, growing up, same age as me around, but he's reading them in Japanese. And so he's absorbing both the visuals of the American movie, but he's not really getting the Americanness of it. He's getting the it's Japanese.
It's Japanified.
It's Japanified. And then, of course, when he tries to reproduce it, in a sense, making his own Western movie, which I think he was doing. I think that, he was, it was like a love letter. Maybe all of his games are a love letter to the films that he loved, or I mean, look at all of his games. But my point is that he was giving back to the world a Japanized version of what the West had given to him. So we've got this very odd situation where a genre that had been created in the West was absorbed by a Japanese person, a very creative person, spit back, but it's a bit twisted in this Japanese way. So then, as a translator, what is my job? Not only what is my job, so in other words, is my job to make it purely Western, removing the Japanese things? How do you even retain the Japanese things? So there's that fundamental question, right? How do you even keep it? You can't, basically. Yeah, a lot of interesting, sort of philosophical problems come up with that. What else did I want to say about that? So yeah, I mean, I was trying to bridge this gap between, I was essentially trying to understand the author's intent, but his intent for a Japanese audience couldn't possibly be the same as for a Western audience.
Let's not forget that love can blossom in the battlefield.
Yeah, bloom. Yeah, I remember what I wanted to say. If you live in Japan and you watch movies and stuff here, you probably would come to the conclusion that, they're a bit behind in terms of, particularly war movies. Cliches tend to be, I would say Japan's a bit behind. If you see in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, Americans become more and more sarcastic or more ironic, you'd find that Japan is a bit mired in the 50s and 60s. So there's this gap between these things. So a line like "Can Love Bloom on a Battlefield," to me, it's difficult to make that work when you're trying to work in a modern, it felt very old and kind of overly cliched. So that was one of the lines that I really didn't like and wanted to remove, but...
It's clear that Kojima was going for a romantic feel, but there is time and place for that, I guess. That's how I saw it.
I personally tend to not like writing lines that don't sound like they could be spoken by a human being. So
And
I can't imagine it.
Because probably they might say it all the time. Oh, love.
I don't think.
You might know if that's the case or not because you live in Japan for a long time now, I guess.
Now, it's more a question of whether or not something sounds just too, what's the word? I'm thinking of what's the word in English. Japanese, that's kusai, but, so I mean smelly.
Okay.
Just overly, what's the word? Schmaltzy, that's Yiddish. Sorry, schmaltzy, like overly saccharine, overly sugary.
Yeah, I get it.
Like Snake is a battle-hardened, veteran, and wanted to keep his voice sounded like a battle-hardened veteran, a guy who chuffs down cigarettes and shoots people, you know.
Almost out of character in a way.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood. So Love Blooming on a Battlefield didn't really fit with my image of Snake. So
Right.
I'd like to say one thing, because I realize how that sounds. When I say that it doesn't match with my image, I'm not trying to change Kojima's words. What I'm trying to do is interpret how Kojima would speak if he was with the same understanding of me as me about American culture.
Yeah.
And if somehow we could share brains and I could bring him up to full understanding of, you know, where Americans are, or in terms of their sophistication for how characters should sound, I always felt he would agree with me. It's just that, you know, we didn't work together, we didn't talk about it, but I always felt that I was being true to the spirit of what he wanted. So it's like, I just don't want anyone to really walk away with the idea that I was trying to walk over his words. It was just, I was actually trying to be more faithful to his, what I felt was his essence, if that makes any sense.
At the end of the day, nobody can read minds, aside from psychology,
Right.
of course. But of course, if you tried to catch what he was going through,
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess it's simple as that.
Yeah.
And the translation is always out of loss. We
Yeah.
try to lose as little as possible. That's,
Yeah.
I guess, what we go for
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. I guess it comes down to the question of, is a translator a part of the production process?
It definitely is. It most definitely is, in my opinion.
In my opinion, definitely is. But I don't.
And then, again, there is so much of you in Snake from Metal Gear that than anybody would think.
Listen, when Snake says to Naomi, who's lecturing him about smoking, he says, "Yeah, but you don't know how good a cigarette tastes in the morning."
That's you.
That's me.
So you see, there is a lot of you in Snake, and that part also reverbers in how people today who played the original Metal Gear see Snake. You know, because of maybe a person that started with Metal Gear 2, in which you didn't have any involvement, Metal Gear Solid 2, I mean, because there is a Metal Gear 2, don't have the same idea of Snake as the people who started from Metal Gear Solid 1. So there is a huge responsibility you have there, a huge part of you that contributed to the legend of Solid Snake, in my opinion.
That in my whole career, I'm probably the most proud of the fact that, I mean, this was Metal Gear Solid 1, and it really wasn't predestined to be the giant thing that it is. I think we did such a good job on it and set it up for success, you know.
Right. Look, thank you so much. I think it's time to wrap it up. But before we do, one last question, well, it's not really a question, more of a space for you to say anything you wish to our viewers, your fans who followed your work over the years. So what would you say?
Wow, first of all, I'd say thank you. I can't believe I have fans. You know, I would say that I really loved, you know, translating all these games, and nothing makes me happier than the thought that I inspired people or I made their days a little bit better. It's awesome. It's absolutely awesome, and I feel really privileged to have had this career and this opportunity. And that's about it. Thank you, everybody, for all your support. And that's about it.
Awesome. Well, guys, I'd say we can now let Jeremy go. We've kept him here for long enough. And you've been very patient. You've answered so many questions today, and I truly, truly appreciate your honesty about the topics we've been discussing. Thanks so much for your time. You really made my day, and I'm sure that of our viewers as well.
It was my pleasure as well.
That really wraps it up. I hope you guys enjoyed this nice little talk with our special guest, Jeremy Blaustein. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can bring you the best quality content. But really, at the end of the day, I just want to thank you so much for spending some of your precious time watching this video to the end. I will be seeing you in my next one, but until then, stay safe, play safe, world gamers.